Welcome back, everyone. We are here in Google Sheets in the recipe book that we have been building. We're going to take a look at how to insert links into a Google Sheet. So let's get started. If you recall, we have this column over here on the right, column H, where we were adding our links when we were adding our first couple of recipes. We were just adding these here temporarily so that we wouldn't lose them. But remember, if you're adding something to a Google Sheet, you're going to copy your link from wherever that link is on the internet, whatever that site or that source, wherever you have found that link. These links that we have here, we pasted in as text, but they don't look really nice and clean, so that's why we're going to look at how to properly add and insert links into a Google Sheet. So step one is to copy the link. We have a few in here, so I'm going to go over here and click on the link, and then I'm going to click on the copy icon. Remember, you may be pulling your link from somewhere else on the internet, so go ahead and copy your link wherever it may be coming from. Our second step is to click on the cell where we want to put the link. Kind of like the title of the recipe, maybe. Maybe that's where we want to put our link. So I'm going to click on the recipe title. Now our third step is to add the link. Now there are multiple ways for us to add links in Google Sheets. You can right-click and then select Insert Link, or you can click the link icon on the toolbar, or my favorite way is to use a keyboard shortcut, which is Command K on a Mac or Control K if you're on a PC. No matter which option you chose, you will get this little pop-up window where you will paste your link, and then you're going to press the return key to apply the link. Notice the color that it turned my text. It's also underlined to indicate a hyperlink. So that's how you add a link. You copy the link from its source, click on the cell, use one of those options, right-click, the icon on the toolbar, or the keyboard shortcut, and then you paste it, and there you go. Now for our recipe book, you may have found that you do not like changing these recipe titles to the links of the recipe. Also, now when you scroll through the recipes, you're going to have this little pop-up window of the website. Maybe you're fine with that, maybe you like that, or maybe that bothers you, and that's okay. There are a lot of options that we have here when we're adding links into our Google Sheet. It comes down to what works best for you and your data set. So I'm going to undo what I did, and I'm going to show you another thing that you can do that may look a little bit cleaner for you. I'm going to click on the cell again, and then remember, I'm going to use our little secret keyboard shortcut, which is Command Return on a Mac or Alt Return on a PC, and that allows us to enter a new line within a single cell. So I'm going to write the word link, or you can write the word recipe link, or whatever would work for you. Then you're going to highlight just that word or words, and you can either use the link icon on the toolbar or our keyboard shortcut. We're going to press enter, and there we go. Does that look better? What do you think? So there you go. Repeat that process for your other recipes. Remember to copy the link. You can add the words link or recipe link. You can highlight it and then either use the toolbar or the keyboard shortcut to create that hyperlink. Again, it can go here with the title of the recipe, or maybe you prefer for it to be over in its own column. Now, with this option, when you scroll through here, you will still see a preview of the link as you scroll down and look at the different recipes. So, some people do not like to have that pop up, and others do, so it depends on what you have with your data here in Google Sheets. If you want, you can add a column with links. So you can use this exact same technique to clean up what we already have. So I'm going to actually click on the link that we have over here in column H. I'm going to click on the pencil icon, and then where you see the word text is what will appear for this link in the cell. So I'm going to change that to link or recipe link or anything that you would prefer, and then I'm going to press the return key when I'm done, and there we go. Now that looks much nicer and cleaner in my Google Sheet. So I want you to pick whichever process works best for you and apply it to all of the recipes in your recipe book to get it nice and cleaned up. So take some time to work on that. add more recipes as you find them, and really begin building up this recipe book. Now you have learned how to add links in Google Sheets that are clean. This is important because you do not want links to take away from the data or be a distraction. Next up, we're going to look at adding images to our recipes, which is one trick that is really going to take our recipe book to a whole new level. So come on over and join me in the next module. Welcome back, everyone. Look at our recipe book that we've been building in Google Sheets. We have completed a lot of formatting and we've recently added the links to our recipes. Now we're going to fill in this column that we set up a while back with images of our recipes. This will help us as we scroll through our recipe book looking for something. You can also imagine that there are other times with other sets of data where images will be helpful. So let's dive right in and look at how to insert images. We're going to start with our very first recipe here, baked apple pork chops with green beans. Our first step is to click on the cell, and then at the top we're going to click Insert. From the menu, we're going to select Image, and you will see that there are two options, Insert Image in Cells and Insert Image over Cells. We're going to look at what happens with both, but for now we're going to use the in cells and look at all of the ways that you can pull the actual image. When you select either option, this window is going to open. You can pull images from your computer with Upload. You can also use your computer's camera to take a picture, which you may or may not use as often as the others, but it is a pretty cool option to have. There is also by URL, which means you can pull the URL from somewhere on the internet, and we're going to test that one out in just a little bit. There's also the option for Photos, which refers to Google Photos, and then we have Google Drive if your image is located there, and then last, there's a Google search if you want to search for the image. For the first one, we're going to use Upload. I have this image on my computer, so I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop it here, and there it goes. Notice how it snapped the size of the image to fit perfectly in the cell. That's one of the positives of using Insert Image in Cells. I'm actually going to delete this and look at another way that we can add this image. So again, I'm going to click Insert. I'm going to click Insert Image in Cells. This time I'm going to do by URL. So for this recipe, I have opened this image of the recipe so that I have the URL. There are multiple ways to get images from sites on the internet, such as a blog or the recipe. One way is to right-click on the image, and you'll have one or more options. For example, Open Image in a new tab is the option that I used to get this image here today, and then I can copy the URL that I have at the top of my web browser. Or, I could have selected Copy Image URL directly and saved a step. So copy your URL and return to your Google Sheet. You're going to paste in that URL and click Insert Image. And there you go. It looks the same, right? Using the URL and uploading directly from your computer are probably the two most common options. So again, let's do our second recipe. You can go directly to the place where this recipe is located. We're going to right-click on the image that you want, and then click Copy Image URL, and return back to Google Sheets, where we're going to click Insert, Insert Image in Cells, select By URL, and then paste in that URL, click Insert Image, and there we go. It's really nice how it snaps to resize it to fit the cell. Let's look at a couple more options for adding images. So, I'm going to delete out this image again, and let's try again. Go to Insert, and let's look at Photos. Remember, Photos refers to our Google Photos if you happen to be using those. You may have images that are in your Google Drive, so you can click on that. And you can search for your image, or you can navigate through your Google Drive to where that image is located. So you're going to double click the image, or you can click on the image, it turns blue, and click Insert. And there we go. So that image came from our Google Drive this time. So let's look at our last option, which is to search Google directly. I'm going to use our green bean casserole for this because it is a rather common recipe. The others may not have really shown up in a Google search. So again, I'm going to make sure I am over the cell where I want the image to be. I'm going to click the Insert menu and then Insert Image in Cells. And now I'm going to go over to Google Image Search. So you can search just like you would on Google. And as I do that, I'm going to select whichever image I want. Notice it turns blue, and then I can click Insert. And here we go. Again, it snapped it so the whole image fits in the cell perfectly. Okay, so we've learned how to add our images. So far, we've added them in cells. As the name implies, in cells means the image will be inside of a cell, just like text is inside of a cell. If it's inside of a cell, that means we can change the size as we change the column and row sizes like this. Notice how the images are changing size with the size of the cell. It also means that you can apply alignment to these images, so you can align them to the top, bottom, left, right, center. What is really great about this option is the image will snap to the size of the cell. You don't have to worry about changing it as you go. Now, if you do want to control the size more directly, you can use over cells. So let's look at this option. I'm going to add this image of our baked apple pork chop so that you can compare the two. Notice the options are the same, so I'm going to drag and drop the image that I have on my computer. The image loads over the cells, which typically is the original image size, so it does tend to come in rather large. I can now pick it up and move it and resize it. Now it does hold in place as I scroll up and down or left to right on my Google Sheet. It does stay in place, so that is nice. I say that, but there have been times when I've opened a Google Sheet weeks or months later, and on that very first time loading, the images are just not in the correct places, and so I do have to X out and come back in, and that usually fixes it itself. Just know that with this option, it can be a little bit more glitchy versus using in cells, so just keep that in mind when you're deciding between which option to use. Now, also because it is over cells, that means as I resize my columns and my rows, the image doesn't move. I want you to think about your project and your needs. That could either be a good thing or a not so good thing that the image doesn't move as you adjust your rows and columns. One last thing, remember that grouping that we did a while back? Let's click that group icon that looks like a little minus, so it temporarily hides our ingredients and directions columns. Notice the size of the images snapped down to reflect the smaller view of our data, which is our recipe book in this case. We can click on the plus to open our group back up and see our recipes and notice that the images snapped back to that larger size. So again, having these responsive images like this is probably what makes using in cells so great as opposed to using over cells. Okay everyone, now our recipe book looks like a real recipe book. You know how to add all of this information, you know how to format, you know how to add the links and add images, and up until now we only had a few recipes here in our recipe book, but now you have the skills to start adding all the recipes that you want. So between now and the next few modules, I want you to begin adding as many recipes as you can. The more you add with greater variety, the more you'll be able to do in our later modules where we will learn to organize it and work with it. So go have fun and then meet me over in the next module. Welcome back everyone. Before you run away because it says we're going to learn how to insert drawings, let me go ahead and just say it doesn't mean the drawings you are thinking of. You do not need to be an artist or have any type of handmade or digitally made drawings. This feature of Google Sheets refers to Google Drawings, which, you'll be surprised, really opens up endless possibilities for using Google Sheets. So let's get started. Okay everyone, let's start with what is Google Drawings. This is Google Drawings. You can access it from your Google Drive or multiple ways, just like Google Sheets. You know you are in Google Drawings with this red icon. It's essentially Google's version of a one-page blank canvas. Some people refer to it as like a single Google slide or as Google's sort of poster maker, sort of like a version before Canva came along and became popular. It has a lot of uses in the education field, so you may already know how to use Google Drawings and you can transfer those skills here to Google Sheets. Now on the toolbar, you see that you can add shapes, text boxes, and images. So let's go back over to Google Sheets and you can click Insert and then Drawings, which again refers to Google Drawings. Notice it just looks like a mini version of that real Google Drawings that we just saw. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add 2 boxes to show you something. One reason why people like to use drawings in Sheets is the ability to drag and drop objects, such as sorting or organizing, whatever it may be. So I'm going to get these 2 in here. And now you can see that I can drag and drop these 2 and move them around. So imagine I had the days of the week and a whole assortment of recipes. I could then easily drag and drop and place them in order for what recipes I wanted to do this week. To get out of here, we're going to click Save and Close. And now I can see what it looks like. Sometimes you may need to zoom out to find where that drawing ended up. It places a drawing in Sheets as if it was an image. So remember, we learned how to add images over cells. That is basically what this Google Drawing is. It is applied as an image over cells. And just like images, you can resize them and you can move them. You can double click to reopen the drawing and edit it. Notice that the image we saw didn't represent the entire space. That's because it tries to be extra smart for you and really only show you what it thinks that you need or want. If for some reason you want all of that extra space to be shown, here's a little secret that I like to use. I put a border by adding a box and making it transparent and putting it in the back. Again, we're not really focusing on Google Drawing skills right now. We're just looking at how you can get drawings into Sheets and why you would even want to. So I'm going to click Save and Close. And this time you can see the entire drawing is showing, and this time it has the border around it. So that's just a little trick if you're using Google Drawings in Google Sheets. Let's take this and look at another reason why people use Google Drawings in Google Sheets. As the name Drawings implies, people like to use this to create more artistic and fancy titles or icons. So let's edit this drawing that we have. Again, you can double click as we did before, or you can click the 3 dots and click Edit. I'm going to use this circle to make a more fancy title for the recipe. I can use all sorts of Google Drawings features to format it and increase the font size. I'm going to click Save and Close when I'm done. And I have it the way that I want it. I'm going to place it where I want it here in Google Sheets. Remember, this treats it as an image over cells so that I can resize it and I can move it to wherever I want it. And there we go. So that's what it would look like. Now, speaking of artistic titles, here's another secret. People like to use this for word art. Within the Google Suite, you'll see word art within Google Slides. But when Google Drawings was launched, it too had word art. Because you can put a Google Drawing inside of Google Sheets, that means you can put word art in Google Sheets. So let's change this circle to word art. So I'm going to delete the circle that I had, and I'm going to go to Actions and then Word Art. I can type what the text is, and there we go. Now I can use all the different formatting features of Google Drawings to design this title the way that I would like to. And just like before, when we're done, click Save and Close, and there you go. Now, I personally like to use this when I'm turning a particular data set into a more presentation type format for some sort of meeting with colleagues or stakeholders to discuss a set of data. It's either do that here in Google Sheets, or I would have to make Google Slides and sort of pull out my charts and graphs and tables and data out of my Google Sheet and into the slides for the presentation. So use this great little secret whenever you find a need or you want to dress up your data for some sort of presentation. Okay, so speaking of secrets with Google Drawings, there's another hidden secret and reason why people love using Google Drawings and Sheets. It's completely unexpected. It's adding videos. Yes, I know that sounds silly, but yes. And I wish there was a more straightforward and simple way for you to add a video into Google Sheets, but for now, we have to use this little Google Drawings secret. Okay, so let's go to Google Drawings for a second. One hidden feature of Drawings is that you can paste in a video that you have in Slides. So, if you have a video in Google Slides, you can copy it, come to Drawings, and paste it. See how that works? Okay, so that means there's a way for us to get videos into Google Drawings. Because we have Google Drawings in Google Sheets, we can do the same thing. So, it's not an option under the Insert menu, but you can copy and paste. Now remember, our keyboard shortcuts are Control-C and Control-V on a PC for copying and pasting. It's Command-C and Command-V on a Mac for copying and pasting. We have a video in Google Slides. We're going to copy that, come over to Google Sheets, click Insert Drawings, just like we've done before. We're going to right-click to paste or use our keyboard shortcuts. And there we go. You can stretch it out to fit the size of this window. And when we're ready, click Save and Close. Again, it's treated like an image over cells. So you can resize it and move it. In the case of our recipe book, maybe you want to add a column for videos like this. So as you scroll, notice it does keep our videos in place, which is nice. Now here's one little trick. To actually watch the video, you're going to need to double click to open up the drawing, and then you can press play. And then when you're done watching your video, click Save and Close to get back out of here. So again, that is a little trick of pulling videos into Google Sheets. Your video will first need to be in Google Slides, and then you can copy it and bring it here into Google Sheets via Google Drawings. Okay everyone, that was a lot, so let's recenter back on how you may actually use this in your recipe book. I have this drawing over here for you, so you can double click to open it. You may like to have a drawing like this to type out your meals for the week. Maybe it's just your lunches or your dinners, or maybe you want to actually write out breakfast, lunch, and dinner for each day of the week like this. This is just an idea. In a later module, we're going to look at adding an entire new tab to our Google Sheet that allows you to do this more fully. And guess what? It's going to let you pull down with a drop-down menu all of your recipes so you can just select from the list. Yeah, it will be amazing, so definitely stay tuned for that. But if you prefer, you can also just use a Google drawing like this. Alright guys, we made it. Not at all what you expected out of inserting drawings, right? It really does open up so many more possibilities for Google Sheets. So next up, we're going to look at inserting more things. Check boxes, notes, and comments. So come on and join me over in the next module. P.S. Don't forget to use this time to build up your recipe book. The more, the better for our later modules. See you soon. Welcome back everyone. Our recipe book looks nearly complete, but we do have a few other things to learn how to insert. We're going to look at inserting checkboxes, so let's get started. Here we are in a recipe book that we've been building. Let's use our grouping to hide our ingredients and directions just for a little bit by clicking on the icon that looks like a minus or a dash up here at the top. And there we go. That looks much better. Okay, so there is one thing missing from our recipe book. what if we needed to know which recipes were vegetarian? Or maybe a friend is coming over for dinner and we need to make sure we've provided gluten-free options for them. So we're missing labels for these different dietary restrictions. Let's use this space on the right. I'm going to add a few here, but you add what works best for you and your family. Think about the items that would help you filter your recipe book by. So use that when you're filling out these columns over here. And there we go. I've listed out a variety of options. If you need to, make sure to resize any columns. Now, how would you like to fill this in? Would you like to put an X in the box, or would you like to write yes? Or, better yet, let's use checkboxes. They're fast, they're easy to fill out a recipe book or any type of data, and they really look nice and clean compared to a wall of text. So, let's first select the area where we want the checkboxes to be. We're then going to right-click, go down to View More Cell Actions, and then Data Validation. This window opens up. The criteria that we're looking for is checkboxes listed down here at the bottom, and everything else is our settings for these checkboxes. So, first, you can customize the cell values by checking or unchecking this box. For example, you may want a checked box to be yes, and an unchecked box to be no. You can uncheck this option if you prefer to keep the default, and the default is true and false, or check it and customize it. Next, we have our options for invalid data. You can actually set it to reject any input other than the checkbox. So, being a personal recipe book, you may not need this. If you're sharing it with somebody, or you have formulas and functions in place that are dependent upon the data in these columns, always select reject, so that you don't end up having to hunt down the place that someone accidentally messed it up. Last thing we have here is appearance, which refers to the message that is given if there is any type of invalid data entered into the cells. In this case, we can just write, click on the checkbox. That seems like a good enough message, and then click Save. And there we go, we have checkboxes. So to use them, just click on them like this, and see? So much faster and easier than writing out yes or no. And look how clean and professional it looks. It's very visual as compared to a wall of text. Now, let's test out that rejection for invalid text. I'm going to type some nonsense in here and then press enter, and there, I get the rejection message. Not only that, because I wrote out a specific thing for appearance, this is my message. Click on the checkbox. So how nice is that? So I can say OK, and look, it turned it back to a checkbox and rejected what I was trying to type. Now, let's look at those cell values. When I select an unchecked box, up here at the top it says false. When I select a checked box, it says true. So for this recipe book, that probably doesn't matter to you. Honestly, most of the time it doesn't. True and false work perfectly fine. Now, if you have another data set where you're using a formula or a function and you're referring to the data in the checkboxes like this, you would really need to know what these cells are, and in this case, true or false. What I mean by that is if you wanted to count how many vegetarian meals there are, you would set it to count all that are true. If you changed it to something like yes, then you would need to change your function to say, hey, count all that are yes. Let's select all of this again, right-click, More Actions, and Data Validation to go back in and look at this. Remember, I can set custom cell values, and in this case, yes and no. But if you get really advanced in the Google functions and formulas, you may want to use single letters or numbers. I'm going to leave this on so that you can see the difference. I'm also going to remove our appearance message so that you can see the difference, and click Save to get back out of here. Now notice how checks are appearing as yes instead of true this time, and unchecked is appearing as no instead of false. Also, if I try to type in this cell and press enter, notice what my message is this time. Again, if this is your Google Sheet, that's probably fine. If you're sharing the Google Sheet with someone, it is nice to have a message to help them understand what they should be entering. We're going to cover that more in depth in our data validation module later on, but for now, you can see the difference. Let's go back into data validation again, and this time I want to show the difference between reject and warning. So I'm going to select warning and save. Now I'm going to try typing in the cell and press enter. Notice this time it did let me type in the cell, but it put a little red-orange triangle in the top right corner. If I click on the cell or hover over the cell, a message appears. It's showing the default message, but again, I could have written a custom message. Okay, let's select everything and go back in again. Here's one more thing I like about this option for adding checkboxes. You can come back in here and specify the range. So right now, there are only checkboxes in row 2 to row 8. What if I wanted to add hundreds of recipes? I need to make this expand to cover all of those extra rows. So I'm going to erase the 8 and put 500 and then click save, and there we go. Now with checkboxes, they are like the images we added that were in cells. Because they are in cells, we can apply formatting to them, such as alignment, just like this. I can do whatever I would like. I can add a fill color. You can use most of the formatting tools that you've learned about with these checkboxes, again, because they are in the cells. Now, let's say you're done. You've decided, hey, I'd rather not have these boxes, but I don't want to lose the actual data, meaning what is and what isn't checked. So let's select this data and go back into data validation again. And this time I'm going to click remove validation. And there you go. It turned everything into yeses and nos because that is what I had it set to. Remember, otherwise it would have changed it to true and false because that's the default. So use that little trick whenever you need to. Okay everyone, that's not all, but rest assured you've done all the heavy lifting and this is the shortcut. Select the area where you want your checkboxes, click on the insert menu, and select checkbox. Done! That's it! So much easier, right? Everything is the same so you can check the boxes. This is set to a default setting, which is true and false for cell values, and the invalid inputs are set to a warning, and of course the warning message is the default message. If you want more than that, you'll need to go into data validation like we were doing. So if you don't need the fancy settings and you're fine with these defaults, use the quick, easy insert menu and select checkbox. You made it! Checkboxes are such a great tool to have in your toolbox when working with Google Sheets. So go have fun updating your recipe book and remember to continue adding as many recipes as you can for our future modules as we begin to organize and work with it. So see you in the next module. Welcome back everyone. In this module, we're going to look at inserting notes and comments. Now, you may be thinking, that's easy. Just add a column and write your notes and your comments in the cells. I like the way you're thinking. You could absolutely do that. But I'm going to show you these two built-in features that may make it even easier for you, whether the Google Sheet is just for you or you're collaborating with others on that sheet. So let's get started. Here we are in the recipe book that we've been building. Let's use our grouping feature to go ahead and hide the ingredients and the directions so that we can get a better view of our recipe book. Remember, that's that little dash or minus icon that's close to the top, and then the plus icon means to open. And there we go, much better. Now, let's say that these times listed here are the times we got directly from the recipe's original location. But after doing the recipe a few times, we have found that it's taking either less time or maybe it's taking more time. There are a couple ways that we can add notes and comments to keep track of that. When we add notes and comments in Google Sheets, there are three ways. You can use the insert menu, you can right-click on the cell and a menu appears, or you can use the keyboard shortcuts. So we're going to look at all three. First, let's click the Insert menu, and at the bottom, you will see Comment and Note. Not only that, you'll see the keyboard shortcuts that are listed. It knows that I'm on a Mac right now, so it's listing the shortcuts for me, but remember, they are different if you're on a PC or some other type of device. What I'm going to do is select this first option, which is Note. This little white box pops up beside of the cell that I was on, and it says Type Here. So let's type something. I'm going to say that this recipe takes 30 minutes for me. Now, here's something you have to remember that's special about the notes. If you press Enter, you'll just get a new line. Unlike you're typing in cells, if you're typing in cells and you pressed Enter, it takes you to a whole new cell. So you'll have to actually click somewhere on the sheet to get out of this note. That is the opposite of what you do with cells. So just try to keep that in mind and you'll find your flow using these two. So click anywhere and there you go. Notice that the cell where the note is now has that black triangle in the top right corner. Does that look familiar to you? It's kind of like that orange-red one that appeared when we had invalid data with our checkboxes. So just like those warnings, if you hover over the cell, the note appears. Move away, and the note disappears. So I love notes because they can hide information that we don't necessarily need to see all over our data, but when we hover, it appears. Let's repeat that process. I can click Insert, or we can use the keyboard shortcuts, which remember are listed here based on the type of device that you're on. So I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, and there we go. I'm going to say that these bytes take about 2 hours. Remember, to not press Enter to exit, you'll need to click on another cell to actually exit out of the note. There we go. And let's repeat this process again, but this time I'm going to right-click on the cell, and then I'm going to select Insert Note from the menu that appears. And there we go. I've added that note. Click anywhere outside of that to get out of the note. And so that was all 3 ways for us to add a note. You can use the Insert menu, you can right-click on the cell, or you can use the keyboard shortcut. Now, let's look at adding comments so that we can compare and contrast with notes. We have the same 3 options for adding comments. So on this first one here, let's use the Insert menu. So I'm going to go to Insert and then click Comment. You can actually use the @ to tag someone, and then they will get a notification, such as an email, so that they can answer you back, or so that they can just see your message in general, whatever it may be. So with this being a recipe book, I'm going to pretend like I'm tagging my husband to say, hey, do you want to do this for dinner? And then I'm going to click Comment. So notice it looks very similar to the notes, except that little icon is yellow instead of black. But it's very similar because I can hover and it appears, move away, and it hides. Let's repeat that process, and this time I'm going to right-click and select Comment. I'm going to pretend like I'm writing another message to my husband. Again, I'm going to tag him, and then I'm going to click Comment when I'm done. And now you can see, again, how notes and comments are similar, but also a little bit different based off that little color that you can see. So the black is for notes, and then the yellow is for comments. Now, comments are really great when you're tagging someone. Now, I am just pretending, but when you do it, you will see their email address appear, so you can actually pick their account and it will tag them. So here's the main difference. Let's pretend like my husband got the notification that I tagged him in. He can come directly back here to my message that's on this one cell in the entire spreadsheet. That's really nice and really important, because when you get a large data set like this on a Google Sheet and you ask someone a question, they may get lost. So if you actually tag them on the one location you want them to look at and you put your message there, then you can actually eliminate some confusion. So definitely use that. Here's the thing though, you can't tag people with notes. So if you do want to tag someone, you need to use comments. Another difference is one button, and you can see all the comments. Down at the bottom of this sheet, it tells you how many comments are on the sheet, and it tells me where they are, and it highlights them for me. That's really nice. There's not a single button that reveals all the notes at one time. And the last thing about comments, you can click the check mark to resolve them. So think of comments as action items. They are notes that need some sort of action, and then that task is complete, so you can resolve it. So don't worry, all comments forever live up here under the comment menu in the top right. It's definitely important when you want to look back at all the resolved comments, especially if you're collaborating on Google Sheets with someone and this is for some sort of project or larger data set. And speaking of resolving the comments, to get rid of a note, you have to either delete what you have typed in that note and it will disappear, or you have to right-click and select Delete Notes. So one last little thing about notes and comments. Let's watch what happens when I try to copy these cells where there was a note and where there was a comment. When I paste it, notice that the note came with it and the comment did not. And now when I try to delete everything, the note stays behind, so now I have to go back in and either delete the text out of the note or right-click and select Delete Notes. So that's the difference between notes and comments. Okay everyone, so that's notes and comments. I want you to think about when you would use notes versus comments. I don't want you to shy away from using notes. They are a very powerful tool that's built into Sheets. Did you notice how I can have such clean data in Google Sheets without my notes in a column cluttering up the page? That's really nice, and it's really important when making Sheets presentable, organized, and clean. But comments are also nice when I need some sort of action, especially if I'm collaborating with someone. So go play around with these two features and then meet me over in the next module. And P.S. get that recipe book filled up for our future modules. See you soon. Hello everyone, we're here in exercise 2 where we're going to apply all of the skills that we have learned in these modules. You know we've been building a recipe book, so what I have done here for you is something similar. In this exercise, you have a landscaping project on your hands, either for you in your home or someone else's home, and you're doing your primary research here with the Google Sheet. So you're trying to figure out which plants you're going to actually purchase and plant around the house. So your job is to pick 5 to 10 plants. You can use any website that you would like, such as Lowe's or Home Depot if those are familiar to you. Maybe some sort of local greenhouse has information for you. There's also a site called Fast Growing Trees. It's a website that has all sorts of plants and the information you would need here for this project. It doesn't really matter as long as you can pull your information about your plants from any source that you would like across the internet. First thing you need to do is turn columns K through N into checkboxes, and then you can start filling in your information. So let's look at these really quickly. First column is the title of the plant. Then you have the picture of the plant followed by a brief description, and you're going to put the link in here, so you may want to mention that it's a tree or a bush or a shrub or a vine. Then you've got space for the price. The location refers to where around the house you're thinking of putting that plant, the front yard, the backyard, whatever it may be. And then you have the growing zone, the height and the width of the plant. I do have a drop down for you to select the sunlight and if it's evergreen or deciduous. And the last pieces are your checkboxes. So remember to aim for 5 to 10 plants. Go ahead and pause this video and work on the exercise, and when you're ready, click play to see the solution. Good luck! Welcome back everyone! How did you do? I'm sure you did great. Let's take a look. Okay, so my first plant I'm going to pick is a miracle fruit plant, so I'll write that here in the first column. Next, I need a picture, so I already have this image opened in a new tab, so I'm going to right click and then copy the link address and come back to Google Sheets. I'm going to go to Insert, and then I'm going to pick Insert Image in Cells. I have the URL, so I'm going to use that option, but remember there's all these other options here that we've learned about. And there we go. Next, I'm going to add a description here, so I'm going to type a couple little things, and then I need to add the link. I'm going to highlight it, I grabbed the link from the website, and I'll use the keyboard shortcut here to add the link, and there we go. The price is about $70, and for location, I'm thinking I would like to have it around the patio. It grows in zones 4 through 11. It only grows to about 2 to 3 feet high and 1 to 2 feet wide. It does like full partial sun, and it's an evergreen. Last time I checked boxes, it's flowering, it bears fruit, and that's about it. Okay, so there you go. Continue adding more to this list until you have about 5 to 10 plants following that same process. Remember, there is more than one way to do most of these things. It's either from under the menus, it's on the toolbar, or you may find it in the menu when you right-click, and there may also just be a keyboard shortcut for what seems to be almost everything. So use what works best for you, find your workflow, and when you are done, there you go, it'll look something like this. Now you can plan out your next gardening project. Welcome back, everyone. In this module, we're going to look at a feature that allows you to clean up your data. So looking at removing extra spaces, removing duplicate rows, fixing any inconsistent data, and identifying any anomalies that are present in your data set, and even formatting numbers that maybe are not formatted correctly. The best part, you don't have to spend hours scrolling through hundreds of data with a fine-tooth comb. This is a built-in feature to Google Sheets that helps you clean up data in minutes. Yes, minutes. So let's get started. Here we are in our recipe book that we've been building. Now, usually with smaller data sets, you're going to see the issues because the data is small, and therefore you'll probably end up fixing them by hand. Also, in the case of our recipe book, we're building it slowly, so we do tend to catch any issues and fix them when we add one recipe at a time. I went through and made a couple little changes so that we would have something to fix, but I want you to also notice at the bottom that we have an A and a B tab for today, so that we can also look at another version of data that's a bit larger and more typical to what you would see or use. Now, when you have a large data set, or if it's imported, you always want to clean it up before you work with it, analyze it, graph it, or anything like that. First step is at the top. Let's click Data and then Data Cleanup. We have 3 options here. If you know you want to remove duplicates or trim the white space, you can click on those options directly. But if you don't know what issues, if any, are in your data set, you can click Cleanup Suggestions, which will review your whole spreadsheet and find all the issues for you. So let's click on that. This window, the sidebar, opens on the right. Let's take a quick little tour. At the top, we have a menu where we can look at all columns, or we can narrow that down to a specific column. An alternative to this is actually looking for the red warning sign that you see over here at the top of the columns in your sheet. This will help you narrow down the sidebar with issues that are only in that column. One really nice feature is that as you hover over these different issues that it has identified, it will highlight them as red in your Google Sheet, and it takes you straight to that cell. I have an arrow here to show more or less issues. I can also decide to ignore the suggestions, or I can, in this case, trim all. If it was duplicates, you would see the word remove. In this case, I'm going to click the button to trim all, which means it's removing the extra spaces that I have. And there we go. It cleaned that up for me in one quick little click. Now, remember, as an alternative, I could have assumed that there was extra spaces throughout my sheet and gone directly to Data and then Data Cleanup and selected the option to trim white space directly. Okay, so one more thing. Let's go down here and you'll see that there are 2 copies of the grilled flank steak recipe. That's a duplicate, right? So let's go to Data and then Data Cleanup and then Cleanup Suggestions again. And look at that. it's not showing that duplicate as an issue. So this is a good point to show you that while this is a great feature, it's not perfect, especially with a recipe like this that isn't your typical data set of numbers. It may not catch everything. Also, if you have several headings and title rows at the top and you have some that are merged, it will throw off the ability for it to catch duplicates, so definitely keep that in mind. So either use this feature before you start to format your titles and headings and things like that, or make sure you remove them if you really want to use this remove duplicate feature. Okay everyone, in order to get a better look at this, let's look at a nice data set that is a bit more typical set of data that you may see or be using. So let's navigate over to our second tab, the one that's labeled as B. This is our data that we used in a previous exercise with New York graduation rates. Notice I did go ahead and remove the first few title rows and I unmerged some of the column headings so that we would be able to do this data cleanup. So let's go to data and then data cleanup, and let's use cleanup suggestions. It found 2 duplicates and it also found some white space that needs to be trimmed. Speaking of white space, notice that both column A and C have the warning icons to let us know that there are issues in those 2 columns, such as white space in this case. Now, looking back over here on the right, I can hover over the issues and it shows me where the issue is located on the sheet. And in this case, let's click remove to remove these duplicates. And we can also click trim all to remove all the white space. Let's click on the X in the top right corner when we're done to remove this window from our view, and there we go. Remember, if you knew you had duplicates or you knew you had extra white space throughout your sheet, we could have selected those directly from the data cleanup menu, but majority of the time you don't really know what issues are present, so you're going to use cleanup suggestions to show you all the issues that it has found within your Google Sheet. Okay everyone, that's it. Data cleanup is probably faster and easier than what you thought it would be, with just a single click and a few little buttons. So remember, before you analyze or work with your data, especially if it's imported, or if it's a very large data set, it's important to clean up the data and rectify any errors first before working with and analyzing the data. Now, go use this time to clean up your recipe book and meet me over in the next module when you're ready. Welcome back everyone. We're going to take a look at a simple yet powerful tool that can help clean up and organize your data in Google Sheets. It's called conditional formatting. Cells, rows, and columns can all be formatted to change the text or the cell color if they meet the conditions that you set, such as a certain word or a certain number. It has so many great uses for small, simple data sets to large, complex ones. So let's jump right in and get started. Here we are in the recipe book that we've been building. Remember, this is just our universal example that we're using, and everything we learn here can be applied to more traditional data sets that are small or large. Let's use our grouping feature to go ahead and hide the ingredients and directions so that we can get a better view of our recipe book. Remember, that's the little dash or minus icon that you see up here at the top to close it, and that turns to a plus icon to open it. And there we go, much better. Like so many other things in Google Sheets, there is more than one way to get started with conditional formatting. We can either go to the Format menu at the top and select Conditional Formatting, or we can come down here and right-click on a single cell or a group of highlighted cells and select Conditional Formatting. A quick little side note, if you don't see it, make sure to look under View More Cell Actions. Google Sheets is really smart and will try to change this menu based on whether you've selected one cell or multiple cells. So, using the Format menu or right-clicking, let's get to where we have the sidebar on the right. Notice that in both of these situations, I didn't say you had to select your data first. That's because once this sidebar opens, the first thing you have at the top is a place for you to select which data, or range, you want this formatting to be applied to. This window also stays open, So that means we can apply conditional formatting to multiple areas of our spreadsheet without having to close out, select our data, come back in, and do that over and over again. So that's really nice. Let's go ahead and click on the data range icon, and now we're going to select the cells, the columns, or the rows that we would like to apply a formatting to. I'm going to select the protein column, and notice there's an option to add another range, which is helpful and makes for a more efficient process when you're doing multiple columns at once. So if I was formatting all of the columns that had similar data, that would be really helpful. In this particular case, I'm going to apply formatting to just one column, and then I'm going to go ahead and click OK when I have that selected and ready. Now, we have two things. We have our rules, and then we have our formatting. Let's look at our rules first. Our first set of rules here at the top apply to text, and the second applies for dates, and then you see we have a set for numbers at the bottom. If I select is empty, all of the cells that are empty are now green, and if I select is not empty, the opposite happens. If I select text contains, that would be a great option to use if you're looking for a certain commonality. For example, if a column of email addresses contains @Gmail, then I'll color those green, and maybe if they all contain @Yahoo, I'll color those red. Maybe it's color all the serial numbers that start with the letter L, whatever it may be. So in this case, I'm going to write the letter P, and then you can see it highlights the cell with pork. Next, we have the opposite. Text does not contain. I love to use this to find issues in my data. So let's go back to the email example. What if someone gave their email address, but they didn't include the @ Or what if the area code is missing from a phone number in another column? I would use this to say, hey, color everything red that is missing @Gmail, or color everything red that is missing these 3 numbers of an area code. So that would be very helpful in helping me identify some issues that I have in my data set. Next, we have text starts with and text ends with. So again, I'm going to use the letter P, and you can see that pork is selected. That's great for pinpointing serial numbers or product IDs or something similar, whatever you prefer. What you'll maybe use the most is text is exactly. So in this case, I'm going to type in NA. And now let's move on and look at our formatting. I want you to think about formatting as one of 2 options. Are you formatting the text, or are you formatting the cell? Which one? Stick to one or the other. First, let's look at cell color, because that's the most popular and common option. So to do that, I can click on the default and pick from these different choices, or I can click the paint can and pick which color I want to fill the cell. Remember how we chose a theme? Yes, another reason why you should do that at the very beginning, because you can see here I have choices at the top to pick a color from my theme. So pick a color, and there you go. The other option is to focus on formatting the text. First, you need to click on the paint can and select None. That is going to make sure that we're not coloring in the actual cell color itself, so I can focus on the text. Now you can select bold, italics, or underline, and then you can specify the font color. So I'm going to select a color, and there we go. When you're done, click Done, and you'll see a list of all of the rules that you have applied. If you click around your sheet, you'll see the different rules that are applied or not applied. What's really nice is you can click on your existing rules to edit them at any time. You can also click to add another rule. This window is very helpful when you end up with more than one conditional formatting rule on a single sheet. I'm going to repeat this process and select my checkboxes that I created. Now remember, it's really important to know what those values are for the cells in those checkboxes. So by default, it's true and false. But we did change some of these to yes and no, and I really need to know that when I'm using these text rules. So you can see that as I'm using the words yes and no, Some cells are highlighting and some are not. And if I use true and false, others are highlighting or not. So you can see I've got two different types of checkboxes applied. That's really important because maybe that was something that I need to clean up. Let's take one last look at our rules. We looked at the text rules at the top. You can see in the middle we have our date rules, and then we have our number rules towards the bottom. Always come back and check these when you're building your sheet because they can really help you work more efficiently and identify errors in your data. It's kind of like another form of data cleanup, right? So we're not done. Meet me over in the next module for part 2 where we look at using color scales. Welcome back everyone. This is part 2 of conditional formatting. We already looked at how to get started with conditional formatting by going into the Format menu or by right-clicking on a cell or a group of highlighted cells to open up our sidebar menu over here on the right. We looked at formatting a single color and the various rules that we have. Now we're going to take a look at our other option, which is to use color scale. So let's pick up where we left off. We have our conditional formatting window open here on the right. I want you to notice up here at the top, we are automatically under single color. Let's look at the color scale option. I'm going to select our time column, and notice for the purposes of this, I did remove the words minutes and hours, and I made sure everything was recorded in minutes and with numbers only, no text, so that this would work. I can click on these colors and change the formatting. I can use the defaults available, or I can pick one and then customize it using the different little paint cans that I see down here on the right. I do like the colors in the default, so I'm going to leave them for now. But remember, just like with anything related to formatting, you can always come back and change your mind and change these colors later. Next, you see that we can set the min, the mid, and the max. Notice that when the min and the max values are selected, the box beside of it is gray. That's because it's going to determine what the min and the max is from your data. I can click the drop-down menu and pick another option such as number, percent, or percentile based on my data and what I'm looking for here. So there we go. When we've got that, let's click done. Watch what happens as I add more info to my sheet. Not only is the conditional formatting automatically applied, if I have a new minimum, so for example, before the minimum was 30 and now it's 5, my color scale changes. That may or may not be important to you, and it may change how you set up your min, mid, and max values on that color scale, so make sure to keep that in mind. Also, I can still change my color scale and edit this at any time. So I'm going to say that instead of a minimum value, I'm going to pick a specific number. I'm going to write 30, meaning anything that is 30 minutes and under can stay white with no fill color in the cell. And that indicates to me that that's a recipe that doesn't take a lot of time. Now anything above 30 minutes will increase in shades of red the longer they take. So you see that 6-hour recipe is down written as 360 minutes. It's one of the darker shades of red. And as you go down, you can see 90 minutes is not quite as dark as the 360. So again, it changes as I add more data, which can be very helpful. Okay, you've worked hard to apply various conditional formatting rules in your sheet. What if your data included prices of a product in January in one column, and then you're coming back a couple months later and you're going to add prices of that same product for August or another month? Or maybe you're comparing student grades from one quarter to the next. Or maybe it's the number of total imports or exports of some sort of commodity from one month to the next. Instead of applying the conditional formatting rules from scratch to these new columns, you can use your existing rule that you've already applied to your first column in just a few quick clicks. We have two options. So let's look at our first one. I'm going to come over here to the right, and I'm going to write a couple random times just to play around and show you this. Now, option 1 would be to come over to our time column where we have the conditional formatting applied. I'm going to select it, click on our super handy paint format tool on our toolbar that we learned about, look like a paint roller, and then I'm going to come back over here to my new column and click. See how quick and easy that was? I also get this message that pops up basically saying, hey, one of your conditional format rules has been updated, so let's take a look. Now we see that the range has been updated to include both of these columns. Speaking of which, that would be our second option, so let me undo this and show you. Okay, now we're back to where my new column doesn't have that conditional formatting applied. So instead of using the paint format, I could just open our conditional formatting sidebar, open up my original rule, and then I can select that data range icon and select the additional columns or rows of data that I want this rule to be applied to. So that's the two main options. I said there were only two options, but there's actually one more almost kind of hidden option, and that would be copy and paste. So I'm going to delete out my time that I had over here so this column is empty. The column may be empty of data, but my conditional formatting rules are still applied. So now, if I copy and paste this column, notice how the conditional formatting comes with it. So imagine if you had this all built out and your data table was ready for you to fill in your data, but the formatting was already ready and already applied. So as you filled in your data, the formatting just showed up instead of having to do the formatting after the fact. So that's a little secret to keep in your back pocket if you ever need it. So if you're copying and pasting columns and rows that have conditional formatting applied, it will go with it. That brings us to the end of our lesson on conditional formatting. It's certainly a tool you'll want in your toolbox when working with data in Google Sheets. Don't forget to come here and use it to either help you organize your data, to help you show it off and present your data, or to use it as an additional data cleanup tool and identify any issues within your data. Take some time applying this to your recipe book if you would like to, and when you're ready, meet me over in the next module. Welcome back, everyone. In this module, we are going to look at something that is both new and familiar at the same time. You saw drop-down menus in a previous exercise. That was a hint towards something that was to come. And that's what we're going to look at today. Even though we're going to look at something new, the drop-down menus, they actually come from data validation, which you learned how to use when you were doing your checkboxes. So that means you get to use those prior skills while learning something new. So let's get started. Here we are in our recipe book that we have been building. Remember, all of the skills that we learn here can be applied to a typical, more traditional looking set of data in Google Sheets. What we're going to do is look at these columns for courses and proteins and turn these into drop-down menus. First, let's talk about why you would even want to use a drop-down menu and why it helps you organize and clean your data. When we talked about checkboxes, we talked about the importance of knowing what the cell value was because you'll need that when using different functions and formulas. If you're going to use a function or formula on a column like course or protein, it's going to be vital that the way you have this information in this column is consistent. For example, in a later module, we're going to use a query to pull all of our entree dishes or all of our side dishes into a separate tab. So that will only work if the way I have information written here in this column is consistent. Meaning if I change one of these side to sides with an S, that means the function isn't going to work if I'm telling it to look for everything that is written as side without an S. So using drop-downs will ensure that only the choices I have specified can appear in this column, and therefore not mess up any functions I decide to use now or in the future. Speaking of using drop-downs to ensure only the choices I have chosen are used in that column, that brings us to our second reason you would want to use drop-downs. If you're working with others on a Google Sheet and they're adding data to it, a drop-down will ensure that everyone is filling out the sheet correctly. Not only that, it makes it easier on that person filling in the new information because there is no guessing what their options are. And our third reason is really just that drop-down menus look nice and clean, organized, and professional. So hopefully I've convinced you to use drop-down menus, so let's look at how to add them to your Google Sheet. Like I mentioned, we're going to change course and protein to drop-downs. Just like with checkboxes, it's through data validation, which remember means you can highlight the cells, columns, or rows and right-click and then select data validation. Remember, if you don't see it, go down to more actions and it will be located there. Now another option with data validation is to click on the data menu at the top and select data validation. We've already learned a bit about data validation through adding checkboxes, so remember at the top here we can select our data, or cell range as it's called, and then we have different types of criteria that we can choose from, and one of them is checkboxes that we've used before. And of course, no matter which one I choose, I'll have options for invalid data and my appearance. To get drop-down menus in the cells, we're going to use one of these lists. There are two of them. We have a list from a range and then list of items. Let's pick list from a range. Now, I have a box to select that is my range, and I have this list hidden over here to the far right. You may also prefer to just put your list on other sheets or tabs away from this main page, which we'll look at adding tabs and working with those later. So for now, I have a list over here to the right. So I'm going to click that data range icon and select my list, and then click OK. You want to have the show drop-down list in cell checked, because that is what gives you your drop-down menu. Next, we have our invalid data and appearance settings that we've used with checkboxes. Remember, if it's a function or formula that you're going to be using on this data, always, always, always select reject. If you are sharing this sheet with someone else to help fill in the data, you can customize your warning and reject messages, and when you have all of your settings, click Save. Now you may see some orange triangles in the top right corner of some of these cells telling us that there is an error. That's a great reason why we are using drop-downs, is to identify some of the things that are maybe errors or issues, especially for the future with functions and formulas and whatever else it may be. So that's a great thing. So we can go through here and use our drop-down to make a correct selection. And also notice down here, if we add more recipes, we have the drop-down menu ready for us to select our course. Also, if you need to, resize the column like I need to. Speaking of which, you may or may not want to leave the warning on the column heading. I'll show you why. If I leave this warning and data validation applied to this column heading, if I need to make changes at any time, I can come over here and select the entire column and make my changes to data validation. Now, if I right-click on this one single cell, my heading, and go into data validation and remove it from this one single cell, it definitely looks better, right? That orange warning is gone. But now, if I try to select the entire column, go into data validation because there's some sort of issue and I want to change it or whatever it may be, look at that. It's treating it as if there isn't anything currently applied to this column. So if I want to change my original settings, I would have to select all of the cells instead of doing a quick selection of the whole column. So if your data is maybe small, that's probably not a problem. But when you have 800 rows or thousands of rows, that may be a little bit frustrating. So keep that in mind when you see that warning about a data validation being applied to a column heading. It's personal preference whether you actually go through and turn that off or just leave it as is. Now let's do the same thing with the protein column, but use the other list option that we have. So let's select our column, right click, data validation, and we're going to use list of items. And this time, we're given a box. Notice it says to separate items by a comma. So I'm going to write out a few different proteins here. And again, I'm going to leave show drop-down list and cell checked and make my choices for invalid data and appearance and then click save. It looks the exact same. So what's the difference between these? I'll show you. So you've been using your recipe book for a while and you've decided it's really large and you'd like to break your courses down a little bit further. Because my list is from a range, in just a few quick clicks, I can come over here to this column, add a couple additional courses such as soups and salads. Now let's quickly look back over here at our courses column and use our drop down, and just like that, look, those options are now there. That was easy. With our protein, we used list of items. That means I have to come up here and update data validation by going all the way in there. So many people find list from a range to be quicker. If your list will change over time and a bit easier because you don't have to go into data validation and potentially mess something up. Others find list of items to be sufficient for what they're working on because maybe whatever that list is, it's not going to change. So that works for them. As I always say, try both, find your workflow, and what works best for you and your dataset. Okay everyone, we made our way through drop-downs in cells. Hopefully I've convinced you they are a great added feature to have in your Google Sheet because they will help prevent errors with functions and formulas. They will help you when collaborating with others on particular Google Sheets so that everyone is clear what should be in a particular column, and they simply look clean and organized and professional. In our next module, we're going to look at the remaining features of data validation. So, after you update your recipe book with drop-downs, come meet me over in the next module. See you there! Welcome back everyone! We have gone into data validation multiple times now, but there is still a few things left to learn. So in this module, we're going to round out your skills by going back into data validation one more time and exploring what all is left. So let's dive right in. We're back in our recipe book that we've been building, and you can see we have our checkboxes, which we used data validation to do. We also have these two columns with drop-down menus, which we also added through data validation. So let's click on our time column, and remember there are two ways to go into data validation. You can either right-click or go up to the top where it has data. So let's look at criteria. The two list options give us our drop-down menus, and at the bottom we have checkboxes. This time, because we have the time column selected, let's set our criteria to number. Notice our options have changed so we can select specific criteria for the number. In this case, we don't want any of our times to be a negative number. So let's say the time is greater than 0, and I'm going to select reject input if any time is entered less than 0 and click save. It doesn't look like much of anything has happened, right? So let's go down here and test it out. If I try to add a negative value, I get an invalid data message. Okay, so this time I'm going to type 10 minutes, and again, I'm going to get that invalid data message because I added text along with my number. So that's how data validation with a number works. Now, let's go over here to the right where I added some extra columns to play with. I'm going to select the email column and go into data validation. Let's select text this time, and let's look at all of our options. I'm going to select contains and say @ or I could have picked .com. Let's look at that. It is showing me that one of my items has an issue, so I should maybe fix it. Not only that, as I add new data, it will let me know what I'm entering is correct or not. Let's go back in again and do the opposite. So does not not contain, and notice how it flipped my error messages to the other email addresses. Alright, let's go back in again. We could select equals and write what is approved. So for example, instead of checkboxes in our recipe book, we could have used data validation to say it needs to equal the word yes, or whatever it may be. Also, notice we have an option for valid email addresses, which is extremely helpful in many cases, and notice how it has identified person 5 as an incorrect email. Now let's go to the link column and go into data validation. I'm going to select valid URL, which is a link, as my criteria. This time, I don't have any errors, but if I change this first link like this and click enter, it now tells me that the link is invalid. So, last time going into data validation, our other two options include date and custom formula. With date, you have a handful of options to pick from, similar to what we saw with number. So take some time to play around with these and make any changes to your recipe book that you see fit. Okay everyone, you're now a Google Sheets data validation expert. You've seen it all. As we've talked about before, data validation is a great added feature to have on your Google Sheet. It will help you clean up and organize your data. It will help prevent errors with functions and formulas, and it will help you when collaborating with others on a particular Google Sheet, so that everyone is clear what should or should not go in a particular column. Now that you've organized your data, up next we'll begin to work with it and graph it, so when you're ready, meet me over in the next module. Hello everyone, we are here in exercise 3. To begin this exercise, you're going to click on the U.S. Agriculture Trade tab below. This data set was provided by the USDA, and there is a link provided with additional information and data that they frequently post and share if you're looking for more. For this exercise, you will use data cleanup to remove any duplicates and trim any white spaces. You will apply single color conditional formatting to the years so that each decade is marked by a separate color. And you will apply color scale conditional formatting to the imports and exports. You're going to use white to green, or white to yellow, or white to red, whichever one you choose. You're going to apply color scale conditional formatting to the trade balance columns using red to white to green color scale. And then you're going to use data validation in the month columns so that the months are converted to drop-down menus. You can also apply any of your additional formatting techniques that you've learned to clean up and organize the data. So, pause this video and take some time to work through these steps. When you're ready, click play to resume the video and see the solution. Good luck! Okay, let's see how you did. We're going to jump over to the U.S. Agriculture Trade tab, and our first step is to do a data cleanup. So let's go to Data, and then Data Cleanup, and then Cleanup Suggestions. It looks like we have some white space in a few of our cells, and so let's click Trim All, and now that's all cleaned up. Next, we're going to apply single color conditional formatting to the years by decade. You can go to the Format menu and click on Conditional Formatting, or you can right-click on a cell and select Conditional Formatting to access our little sidebar. Now, we have two columns with the years, so let's select those two columns as our range. And next, we're going to format cells if the value is between 1970 and 1979. I'm going to format just the text and not the cell fill color, so I'm going to make sure that my background is set to none, and then I'm going to set my text color to one of these colors, and I'm also going to bold it. Then I'm going to click Done and repeat that process until I have a different color for each decade. Once you're done, you will have a total of 6 for the 6 decades that are in this data set, and it will look something like this as you scroll down. Notice how each decade has its own color. Next, we're going to apply color scale conditional formatting to the imports and exports. Again, We have 2 imports and 2 export columns, so let's make sure we've selected both. I'm going to apply white to green for my exports and then click done. I'm going to repeat this process for my imports, and I'm going to select white to yellow this time, and then repeat this one last time for my trade balance, this time selecting red to white to green, and click done. Now I can scroll through my data and have a good insight into my data just from this use of the color scale. So the darkest greens we see in the export columns indicate the largest amount, and the darkest yellow in the imports indicates the largest. The trade balance column is really nice because I can see that dark red is the lowest, dark green is the highest. Let's zoom out just for a second and let's scroll again. Wow, do you notice that progression over time as we go from the 1970s to more recent years? That is all just from using color scale, and we haven't even gotten into graphing, and I can already see information coming out of my data just from using the scale. Next up, we have data validation to turn these months into drop-down menus. Remember, you can go into the data menu, or you can right-click on a cell and go to data validation. Our criteria will be a list, so I'm going to pick list of items, but you could have chosen list from a range. I'm putting my months in here, and then I'm going to click save. Make sure to repeat that for our other month column on the right, and there we go. That looks so nice. And the last step is to add any additional formatting to further clean up and organize this data, which is up to you, such as adding any formatting to headings, resizing columns, formatting your data, etc. Whatever works for you. So, how did you do? I'm sure you did a fantastic job. When you are ready, meet me over in the next module.